Hey everybody, my name's Jon Bye. We're talking war stories. Let's go.
I think that's the best one. You don't need anything else more. We need no further introduction.
Okay, cool.
And that's worth a like and a subscribe right there.
Yeah, I love it.
Man, I appreciate you doing this. I wanted to have a conversation with you because you lived through, as a homeowner, 2008.
I did.
And there's a lot of people comparing today's market to the 2008 market.
Totally.
So I would like you to start off. What was it like? When did you buy your first home? What year?
My first home, so, 19, so I was 20 years, so I was 21.
You were
I was
20 years
21,
old.
so 19, yeah, I was 20 years old, so when I bought my first house.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what year was that?
Yeah, it was, that'd be 2001.
2001. Okay, so you bought your first house in 2001.
Yep.
And you held on to that house for a good amount of time, or did you move to a different house as escalation was happening? Because the big escalation in the market was in the very early 2000s, and then again, kind of like, let's say 2006, 7.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely. So I kept that house for till 2006, I want to say.
Okay.
So I bought that house. It was 3.5% down,
Yeah.
5% mortgage, and it was $1,000 a month.
Okay.
And I remember I didn't rent before, so I didn't really have any like skills and really budgeting and things like
But
that.
back then, you're probably talking about like 200 grand for a house.
150.
150. Okay.
150, right? So it was just at that point it was the same price as rent. So, but I saw once I always believed in home ownership. Just all my parents had homes, right?
Yeah.
So that's just kind of what you did. And my dad was in and out of the business, and he was like, "Man, instead of renting, you should for sure go buy." Which I'm 100%
Oh,
glad
your
that I
dad was
did.
a real estate agent?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A couple
Cool. I
times.
didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, because they dabbled in it, let's say, like most real estate agents.
Yeah. Okay, so you bought that house, and then you sold out of that house, or did you keep that house?
So I sold out of that house and ended up buying another house. But what I ended up doing is being an entrepreneur, because I ended up taking all of my equity out of that house to just supplement into my business in ways that I thought would leverage that in a way that made sense, which ultimately at the end of the day didn't.
Okay.
So
you, like many people at that time, over leveraged.
100%.
Yeah. Why was that?
At the time, being young, again, too, right? So, I go back, and if I could talk to my 24-year-old self, right? I think all of us get caught up in trying to like compete with other people. Really, at the end of the day, that's kind of what ended up happening. Was I wanted to get to another level, and I thought the only way that I was going to be able to do that was by getting money to then buy certain things to help me get to another spot, which didn't work out.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you're in the U.S. market, I'm in the Canadian market. Was it just the access to money that was too easy that made that happen, do you think, for you? Or was it trying to keep up with the Joneses that was...
It was for sure keeping up with the Joneses.
Really?
There was still like... it wasn't the easiest thing to do, but there was also that house when I had refinanced out of that cash out refinance to put it into my business. Like most people would have done it to put it into a boat or a new car or something like that.
Yeah.
I put it back into my business, but I did it put it into things that just didn't make sense.
Okay.
But it was for sure just trying to, I wanted to, I was young in the industry, and, I wanted to play with the people that had been around for a while. And in order to do, a lot of the things that they were doing, I had to have some money to be able to do that. So that's why I ended up doing that.
Okay, so then you saw the big run up in 06, 07.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're an agent at that time, you're helping people in the same spot.
Yeah.
And then like 08 happens.
Yep.
And it doesn't go well.
Yep.
You owned a home at that time.
Yep.
Did you own one or multiple homes?
Yep.
So when you were buying those homes, at that time, just before that, for us in Canada, it was like 0 down 40 year.
Yeah.
Which was a problem.
Yes.
Right? It was almost like, hey, do you have a pulse? We'll lend you the money.
Yep.
Right? And we'll lend you like 110%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you owned homes at that time where they all leveraged?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Well, at that point, too, like at the minimum down payments, I had 2 at the time. And I actually still own that house that I had done that big refi out of. And then I had
Oh,
one
you
other
still
house.
own that one?
Still own that one, and I ended up having to sell it because of the positions that I got in. But
Okay. Oh, you don't own it now?
no,
At that time
no,
you
at
did.
that time I did. I do not own it anymore.
Okay. So you own multiple homes, and then 2008 happens.
Yep.
Everything goes upside down.
Yep.
You guys did short sales like crazy.
Lots.
We didn't. We definitely had some foreclosures here and there. I think I've seen 2 short sales in my career. You guys, that was the day. So explain for most people watching this that don't know what a short sale is or how that happens.
Yeah.
Explain the difference maybe between that and a foreclosure.
Yeah. So the way that we were doing short sales, essentially the bank would take a lesser payoff in lieu of taking the property back, because the banks aren't in the business of owning real estate. Like, they don't want the property. They just want their money, right? So they figured, hey, if I can negotiate a deal with the owner that's already in there, that I'd rather just take that than go to all these other steps and then just eventually have to sell it anyway.
Okay.
The challenge was that, think about like the longest piece of red tape you could ever look at. It was just like constant battle, because you had, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that were trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, our success rate at that point in time was not great, just because trying to weed through all that stuff was super hard. So, and at that point, like, I was negotiating them on behalf of my clients. So the majority of my day was like on hold with the bank, which made things super challenging. So
let's say you pick a house in your brain, maybe the one you're living in 08 when that happens. What'd you buy it for previous to 08?
Yeah. So, and I have a great case study of this, because the house that at the time that I had purchased, fog in the mirror, right? So I'd fogged the mirror.
You walk into the bank, they checked your pulse, and they were like, how much do you want?
Yeah. They're like, what do you want? So I bought the house. It was, that must've been 2007, probably, before everything kind of fell out. So I bought it right at the height, 6 months maybe before everything started going crazy. So I bought it for $250. No inspection, there was for sure stuff wrong with it. And I still own this house to this day. So what ended up happening is I bought that for $250, ended up leaving. And during this time, I actually I had that house and the other house. I went and rented a room from one of my best buddies, Josh, in my office, and still an amazing friend of mine. He let me rent a room in his house for $500. So I rented out these other houses. I rented a room from him just to try to figure all this stuff out. So, but that house that I bought at $250, it was interest only loan, and it was like a negative AM or something. Like, it was crazy. It was so cheap. It was like $800 a month or something. And I think at the time I was getting maybe $1,300 a month. So I'm like, I feel like I'm making money on this thing as values continue to plummet, right? Yeah. So that thing probably went down to maybe $150. But I just ended up hanging on to it because the bills kept getting paid, but it was all interest only for 7 years, which then I eventually ended up refinancing out of and still have as a rental to this day. And now it's probably worth, though, it's like $450. So just being able to, so I just weathered the storm.
So you bought something at $250, it went down to $150.
Yeah.
But you managed to hold on to it.
Yep.
Because you didn't get hit with some crazy situation that you couldn't afford it.
Yep.
And then now we're 15 years later or so.
Yeah.
And you're almost double your money.
Almost doubled. Yeah.
Wow.
Just by time. Yeah. Just letting it play out.
Okay. But you did have another property where that wasn't successful.
No, that wasn't the situation. So that house, so it was funny. So I'd accumulated all this debt during this time, right? And ended up, renting a room for my buddy, getting all my finances straight. Like, I had leveraged all this money and spent it on dumb things. I had sold off that first house, and unfortunately, it's like dumb things in my business, which I thought were the right things to do. They just weren't. So I'd made a business decision that just wasn't the right one, because I didn't know enough yet. So I'd spent about probably 6 to 8 months just trying to get my money right. And then during that time, things started to kind of rebound a little bit, and I felt like I was getting some more traction in the business side of things. And I ended up buying my dream house at that time. unfortunately, like this was still kind of through the period of where all this was going on. So that wasn't like a ton longer. So I was like out for, a very small portion of time, and then jumped back in the pool, like even when the market was not great.
Yeah.
So I just re-entered again, and then
So
the
you bought
market
that after 08?
Yeah, but it was still on the down
Yeah.
spiral. Like it
Well,
was
you're
not,
down.
Yeah.
You're down. What, 6 years?
Yeah, it was a long time. Yeah, so I just didn't think, I was like, man, this is a pretty good deal, and I should get in there. And then it just kept going and kept going down and down and down. And that house that at the time I bought for, I think it was like 380, and that was the same thing at the bottom. Like it was, sub 200s.
Really?
Yeah. So it was like the 1-2 punch, right? It was just.
But you managed to make your payments on that house.
Yeah, same thing. You managed to make the payments. And we tried to refinance out of it a bunch, but the bank just wouldn't loan me the money on it.
So banks though, I never understood this because we never had it in Canada. You guys called it like either you get like a new rate later on or like a predatory rate. So it's like they give you a low rate introductory first.
Yep.
And then after that, they're like, oh, by the way, here's your new rate.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is like during that time, rates were real low. Not as low as they are today, but back then it was low. And every year it would increase. Like it was adjustable all the time. So, or you had like an interest only option, but then only for a certain amount of years, then it went to an automatic repayment. And that's where most people got stuck, was that they had an affordable interest only payment.
Yeah.
And then it came due to, okay, you don't get interest only anymore. You got to start paying it back. And that's where most of us got in trouble.
Okay.
Was that my payment went from $1,500 to $4,000. I'm
Okay.
like, I can't. Like,
Yeah.
there's no, like,
There's nothing there.
there's
So
nothing there.
then you go to the bank and you're like, listen, I want to stay here. Let's work something out.
Yep.
And the bank's like, no.
There was no, they were not forced to have to continue to keep us as clients.
Yeah.
It was just like either
Which
you
is a
figure this out-
benefit to what we have.
Oh, 100%.
Like we have to, your bank in Canada has to give you the opportunity to pay back, no matter what the interest rate is. They have to give you the opportunity.
Yeah.
So when you did that, you now have a higher payment, and the house is worth a lot less.
Yep.
So you go to the bank and you're like, let's work something out. They don't want to work anything out. And you're like, what, you're just going to be like, okay, you're going to make me walk away. I want to keep the house. I want to take on a higher payment, but it can't be that high.
Yeah.
The house is worth way less. You guys, as the bank, you guys are the bank, you're going to screw yourselves if you don't let me out of this.
Oh, absolutely. Like it makes zero
So
sense.
what? That's what I don't get.
Totally.
Why aren't they like, hey, this payment is better than us taking on this short sale.
Yeah, totally. And they've changed that now with, with COVID stuff, which we can kind of chat about a little bit later. I think they've kind of learned their lesson from the crash in the way that they handled COVID. But at that time, I tried. So you could a loan modification was like the hot thing if you wanted to stay in your house. And what you're trying to do is just get it to a point where, you could pay, and you're more than willing to pay more than what you were before. But you couldn't even you couldn't refinance. You couldn't do anything, because in order to go 20% down on the actual value wasn't even an option, because you had to go 20% down to refinance on what 3 times the value of the house.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Because there's no way.
I know,
to get
because we don't have that problem. So I'm learning.
You would have to pay it down so much where it's just like it's zero chance. Like there's no way. Like 99% of the people we're not in any position to.
And as a result, the banks ended up with a whole bunch of houses that they didn't foreclose on necessarily. They sold for less.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They either were able to negotiate a short sale, or they ended up just taking them back. Okay. And because of how much was there, like we would have people that were in their houses for years without making their payments, because there's just such a backlog of everything that was going on. And it's taken so long to kind of grind through that entire mess. And people are always asking me too, like, man, when are the prices are going to go down? Like, when's it going to happen? It's not. It's like virtually impossible to see something like we saw then. It's just not.
So I want to get into that. So you said 2 things. I do want to compare today versus then. I also want to talk about, you said that they've handled it better with the pandemic. So you think the forbearance program, I'm assuming, where they've let people not make their payments and just kind of push that loan down the road is a lot better program than what they were doing before?
Oh, 100%. Well, the thing is that we're continually in an accelerated market. So that's the difference, though, is that all those folks that were in trouble, like, or couldn't make their payments because of some COVID-related thing, or they had applied for forbearance and were granted that, because the market continued to increase, most of those people that needed to sell just sold. And it wasn't even a big deal. Like, they just, all their arrears just got taken off because there was so much appreciation in such a short amount of time.
Do you think it was the same amount of people, or do you think it was way less people anyway?
That went through the process?
Like the amount of people that got themselves in trouble in 2008 versus over the last year and a half.
Oh, way less.
Way less than the last year and a half.
Oh, yeah, way less. Oh, yeah, we're talking a fraction.
Okay.
Yeah, because before it was like, it was ridiculous. It was like why weren't you doing it? Like, at that point, there was like so many people. It's just so easy. But here, though, you still had to qualify initially to get the loan at like a reasonable down payment, reasonable credit. So even those folks, like, there was legitimate challenges at that point for them. The lucky part was that we were in an accelerated market, so it didn't really impact it.
I heard a stat in Canada. It was something like the majority, let's say 80-85% of the people that opted out of their mortgages for a year or better part of a year have over an 800 credit score. So they're just good savers, and they're like, hey, if you're not going to make me pay for a year, I'm just going to save all that money up because I don't know what's coming down the road.
Well, at some point too, like, some people would say that they did a strategic move, right? They were given an opportunity. They didn't spoil that. We
hope they haven't spoiled it.
Yeah, but totally. And I'm sure that there's the majority probably,
if you got an 800 credit score, you're probably in pretty good shape.
You're probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So, maybe you took those funds and allocated them somewhere differently. You might have done something like that. But again, that was really rare. Like, we weren't having, I didn't hear a lot about that. We had, in the short sale heyday, there was you go to a party and half the people you were around were doing a short sale. It was, and also too, then it was like everybody was kind of in it together and everybody was freaking out and everybody was going through the mud. But with the forbearance piece, I think most people now were kind of they didn't want to talk about it. The majority of the people that were utilizing forbearance as a tool, didn't talk about it, didn't bring it up. I never heard from anybody besides when I was on appointments and actually talking to people that were looking to sell.
And then, like you say, if you're in forbearance and you have some sort of a problem, rate, everything's gone up, and so you're just like, I'll sell. I may have to go rent, but I got $100,000 in my pocket. Bank's paid back. Everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy,
including the new buyer who got a house, because you're where you are, just outside of Seattle, probably even lower inventory than where we are.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Outside of Vancouver.
Yeah, it's tight. So the one thing too, though, is that even with that, the loan modification stuff that we talked about, with the forbearance piece, a lot of the times, the majority of those, even if they wanted to stay in the house, they just put them at the back of the loan. And they're not doing anything because the values keep going up. So all right, we'll take you back to your old payment. We'll put your debt on the end of the note. Pay us back when you sell, whenever you sell.
So what do you think? So when you look at there was the run up 1, 2, 3, and then it kind of cooled off for a bit, and then it kind of picked up again up into 08. And a lot of people are looking at our last two recent surges, where I am anyway in Surrey, as something similar, and they're preparing that 2022 is going to be the 08, even though we didn't really have an 08. I mean, we had a stinker couple of years, but by 2015 we were double where we were. So what do you see as the same, or what is different in those two different time periods? Because people that are watching this are probably thinking, what do I expect in the future? They don't really care what happened about the last 15 minutes we just talked about.
Totally. So 100%. So look at just geographically, the one thing about our two areas are very similar. So we got the mountains, we got the water, and we got the border, right? So there's only so much land to go around. And if you go back to then, think how much development opportunity there was. So man, you had tons of people, big tract housing developments all over the place because there was a ton of land. So they had all this inventory to churn through, right? So there was tons of opportunity for people to buy, and they took advantage of it. Everybody that could buy did buy. Now, all those houses now are occupied. There's no land rush anymore. The land is gone. So if the land was there and we had opportunities for people to build huge projects all over the place, then maybe there would be some concern. But ultimately, that was the biggest thing that got us in trouble. There's just tons of options. Right now, there's no options. It's really hard to get in trouble when there's no options.
How do you think because I think I was just reading today, the Fed said they're expected, the U.S. Fed, are in all their wisdom, the Canadian Bank of Canada came out and said, we're not doing nothing next year. And then the Fed came out the next day and said, we're increasing 3 times.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's cute, Bank of Canada, because you're going to be doing exactly whatever, your U.S. counterpart says. What do you think, if you see rates drive up a full percentage, what does the market do from here for you out in Seattle or outside of Seattle?
So the one thing is, I actually kind of hope it does to some extent. We're going through a renovation project, so hopefully they don't do that like till after we're done and we want to refinance. But who knows, right? So, but if it does, it's no big deal. So, we talk about, we've had such a large increase in price every single year, and you can't do that. You need to figure out a way to tone it down. And really the only way that you can tone it down is by diminishing people's purchasing power, but to kind of let things calm down. Like having 18% increases year over year. Like, dude, like you can't do it. Like it's gonna, like that's, at that point, it's not, you just get to a point where people just can't buy anything. It doesn't matter if they don't believe in home ownership. It's like, there's just no way. And there's only so many people that are gonna want to, pool families together and, buddies that are buying houses, gals that are buying houses together, all sorts of stuff, like, trying to pool your funds to just get an investment at an early age. Like if I had the same job that I had when I first got in the market, 20 years ago, there's no way. Like I couldn't go buy that same house now that's probably 400 in that with the same similar type wage, or if I would have been making there. Like I couldn't even got the game. So, I don't think that, I hope that it's not going to stop price increasing. It's for sure not going down. But what I see our market is that instead of the 16 to 18% increase, maybe it's 5 to 8%, which is still freaking amazing.
It's still too much, in my opinion.
It's still too much. But I think though but we could see that as a similar, we can sustain that type of increase because we're still a bit behind you in pricing, right?
Yeah.
So we still have some room to be able to move up, just not at the rate that we currently are. Like if it grabs another gear, like then it grabs another gear. Like I don't know. Like you don't know what it's going to do until it happens.
I really think that if we see go into a third year now of 20+% increase, I actually think only bad things can happen. But I do think this year, if we do, I can see a spot where the buyers self-impose like a limit. Right, where the Bank of Canada goes, okay, we're going up a full percent, and everybody takes their foot off the gas pedal for a bit, and then it comes back. The only trouble with that is it's the dip. It's kind of like Bitcoin, right? You watch it go up, and then the dip isn't as low as the previous low, and so you should have bought in. And then by the time you're smart enough to go, hey, this is probably a pretty good price, it's already gone off again. So I do think that there will be a turn back, but it could be a turn back of 10%. After an increase of another 20, and then that only lasts for, let's call it 18 months, and everybody's still waiting for it to come down, then it goes again. That's what I think is probably more realistic. I don't know if your market feels.
Well, I think you just look at even the stock market. It's the same thing. It's like the way that, it'll always, if it goes down, it's always going to rally back higher than it was before, right? So, but in the moment, people don't want to buy when it's going down, right? Because there's risk in that. But, if you look at, buy somewhere in the trough, right?
What would you have? I mean, looking back, obviously, you probably would have just waited till the bottom. But when you were technically, you lost your home, right? When you're losing your home, is there any advice or anything you're going through when that happens that you can give to anybody that would be watching?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that at that point in time, you have to be as strategic as you possibly can. Like if the inevitable's out there, then you got to look at, all right, what if I take path A, B, or C? And, there's the aggressive path where you're not going to, you're not paying anything, you're going to lose it. Everything's toast. You don't have a job. You have to figure out how to try to maintain. Cash is king, right? So the minute you give it away, it's gone. So if you're in dire straits, you got to either figure out, I'm committed to just letting this happen, which not really the real exciting thing to do. For some people, that's the only choice. For me, I look at, all right, how do I get creative, right? How do I make it work? So for me, like when I was younger, is like, all right, how many roommates can I pack into this sucker to try to make it happen? I'll park my car in the garage and they'll pay a little extra and park it, or I'll park mine in the driveway, they'll park in the garage, right? Anything that I can do, right, to supplement stuff. A lot of it too, man, is just stop buying dumb stuff, right? Like you got to really just pull it, rein it in as much as you can, and don't spend frivolously, and try to do your best to work through the process, and talk to people that you trust. And everybody's situation is obviously very different, but I would say just don't give up, right? At the end of the day, like don't give up too soon, because we know the same thing. You just said it, right? Like if you're in the trough and you can pay for it, just don't be mad because your house is worth less than you bought it for. Who cares? It's like you still need a roof over your head, right? It's like in the market. If you don't sell,
you see that so often, right? Like the foreclosure, it's like they get the foreclosure notice, hey, we're foreclosing on your house, and everybody's just gone. And it's like, but you could, I hope you don't find yourself in this situation, but if you're getting foreclosed on and you're now not paying for that mortgage, you got 6 months to save up to get yourself back on the feet.
To try to do
on
something.
The other side.
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah, but most people in that time though, you're defeated, man. You're beat down. You kind of want to get, every time you go, it's a reminder. Also, too, I think there's also a lot of people like feel that's irresponsible. I think at the end of the day, you also like have some internal turmoil with like, I'm in this house that I'm not paying for. And I think
emotionally,
it's got to be tough, super taxing. So I think that's why a lot of people.
Well, for our emotions, I think we should have a couple more beers and get out to the pool. All right, so I want you to look right there. Tell everybody to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. It's either there, or there.
It's around there somewhere.
It's around there somewhere.
Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Let's get out there and have a couple more beers.
Let's do it, brother.
Okay.
Bye.